Obviously, I'm not always thinking hard enough.
You didn't post the video from yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, I can show you right now.
I will check after. I have it recorded. I just need to upload it. I will sort that out. My bad. Did it show up maybe on the YouTube channel, just not on the Google Classroom? Because I posted both in both, like, but I'll figure it out. I will. I promise I will. Okay. Let's jump in because we don't have much time. Time is always flying. Aren't you excited that summer is so close? I bet you are. Representing data graphically. So now we're going to turn those data points, right, into a graph. Okay. There are 4 ways to do this. I will say this, before you start analyzing, you should always find the MCT, standard deviation, and range. That is always a good one to start off with. Because it gives you an overview, it kind of gives you a hint as to what's coming your way. And it's a big chance that you might need it for your graphs. Line plots, I'm not going to cover it because I already covered it. That's one of the ways of graphically representing it. Check. Frequency table or chart. This is a requirement for the next 2, for 3 and 4, right? You need a frequency table in order to make your histogram and your frequency polygon. I will show you that technically you can do both in one shot. So really, there's only one graph needed to do both. So I'll show you that. I'm all for saving time, okay? So histogram, frequency polygon. A histogram is just a bar graph where the bars are always touching. A frequency polygon, you connect dots with straight lines. So it's basically like a line graph. And so line plot, I'm going to skip. I already covered it, right? You can actually say example on page 7, right? If you want to have an example, you can go and get it. You can look at it, and it's actually fairly straightforward. Well, I will see after the AC, I might have to review a few things. But here's how you deal with a frequency table. When you do a frequency table, you need 3 columns. You need the interval, the tally, and the frequency. And look at down at the table here. Interval, tally, and frequency. I'm showing you already that those are the 3 headings here. I will also give you a hint. Use sorted L1, right, to enter data. Determine the number of intervals. Anywhere between 5 to 12 is ideal. This is going to be maybe a little bit controversial, but I will clarify that. Note the number of intervals can be chosen by you. Intervals are technically chosen by you. You can pick that normally. On an assessment, however, you will be given the number, right? On an assessment, you'll be given the number of intervals, because if I don't, it's just all over the place. Some of you might pick 10, some of you might pick 8, and it's just much harder to mark. Third step is calculate the interval width, which is basically the range divided by the number of intervals or rows that you're choosing to find, right? You can round this number though. Make sure you understand that. That's just a guideline. Fourth step, start your interval column and use the interval width to get there. Use a low enough value, right? Use a low enough value to include the lowest value of the set. And this is important here. If a value falls between 2 intervals, place it in the lowest interval, okay? Maybe that's worth highlighting as well, okay? The following shows a frequency table showing the heights of planted trees. So somebody made this already. So I'm going to first go with a partially filled in, and then we're going to fill in one completely. Okay. So let's say you have a bunch of points, a bunch of heights, and you're like, okay, I have a plant that's 115 centimeters tall. That would definitely fall between this interval. Okay. So then you keep on marking down, right, the number of occurrences. So in this case, when you're done collecting all your data and putting them in the various intervals, that's when you come up with your frequency. So in this interval, I have 3 trees that fall in that interval. My next interval, I have, do you know how to read this? If you have 4 lines with a cross, that is 5, right? I hope you know that. So 5 and 3, this would be 8. And then in this category, I have another 3. And in this category, I have 5 and 5, that's 10, plus 2, that's 12. And I always like to make a note here. If you add this up, right, 12 and 8 is 20, plus 6, so this is total. We're considering 26 trees. I always like to know that, right? Like, this is how much we have. And you might wonder, what's, Mr. Dixon, you said 3 categories like this. Pay close attention. Like, I only told you 3, right? What about this, Mr. Like, midpoints, what's that? You're gonna need that later, most likely. So I just added it there to prepare you for it. So what is a midpoint? It's exactly what the name says, the point in between. So the midpoint between these two would be 100 plus 125 divided by 2. Doesn't that look like axis of symmetry? Almost, right? So that would be 225 divided by 2. That's 112.5. 112.5 centimeters. And let's see if you see a pattern here. You take this interval, 125 plus 150, and you divide that by 2. Right? That gives you 275. Make sure you add up, hit equals, then divide by 2. That's 137.5. Then you take the next interval. Right? And then you go divide it by 2, that's 162.5. Take the next interval. So you basically add up these and you're finding the middle between them. You're finding the average between them. So this is 187.5. You should see that the amount is going up consistently from one to the other. In this case, it's a little harder to see, but it does. So midpoints are, I will kind of block this off here. Okay. This is the frequency table. Okay. The frequency table is just those 3, but the midpoints are often required. Actually, 80% of the time you're going to need to find the midpoints. So just go ahead and just always have a space there for it. Okay. So 112.5 is right in between these two. 137.5 is right in between these two, and so forth. Okay. Now let's go to the back side, and I want you to be able to see this. That's why I put them next to each other. I know that an even page and an odd page always go together, so I'm counting on this being there. Watch this. It says here on page 9, use the frequency table to create a histogram or frequency polygon. Okay. Interval is placed on the x-axis. That's very important. Interval will go on the x-axis. Frequencies on the y-axis. you're not starting at 0, you have to use a zipper, and I will show you what that means. Histogram, create bars that touch and have the same width. Very important. You can't have different widths when it comes to histogram. Frequency polygon, you connect the midpoints. Sorry. You can graph them both on the same plane. That's very important. Okay. So on the y-axis, you always have the frequency. Okay. And in this case, it's the trees, right? How often does that happen? So that means the number of trees. Along the x-axis, you have the height in centimeters. Okay. Frequency would be the number of trees. Height, just read the question. It should make sense what goes where. Okay. And along the x-axis, you basically just read off your values. Watch this. I know I can't show you both on the. Can I? Can I maybe? No, that's going to be 2. But look at my interval here. I'm going from 100 to 125. And then I'm going from 125 to 150, right? So when you go to your graph here, let's say I want to start right here. I want to make this my 100th line. Let's see. 100 to 125. I'm going to start. Let me just check here first. I'm making sure this works out. It's because I printed this grid is different than my key here. Okay, so that's why I'm checking this out first. 100 to 125 to 150 to 175 to 200. It works out perfectly. So I'm going to make this mark right here my 100. I'm going by my frequency table. 125, 150, 175, 200. What's the problem with that x-axis right now with the scale? Yeah, it's not consistent. You see that it's 100, right? And then I use 4 boxes again, and I'm only going up by 25. That's a problem. Easy solution is the zipper, right? So if you put that in, if you put that zipper in, it doesn't matter what you start at here, as long as you're consistent thereafter, okay? We only use that in stats. We don't use it in quadratics, okay? Because stats, we have big values quite often. And so let's look at this. Look at your interval. You look at your interval on the table, and then look at the numbers here. You're going from 100 to 125, right? And then the second entry is 125 to 150, 150 to 175, and so forth, okay? So we're going to make bars. So between 100 and 125, how many do I have? Yeah, I have 3 trees, right? And the highest I go is 12. So let's see if I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, right? So if I make each box worth 1, I'm fine, because I look at my frequency on my table, and the highest I get to is 12. So between 100 and 125, I have 3 trees, right? So I got to go make a bar like this. Okay, and I always like to write on top the frequency. That bar represents 3 trees between 100 and 125. Then you go from 125 to 150, I have 8. So you go up, this is 5, 6, 7, 8. Watch this. The bars touch. And so I have 8 trees that are between those 2 heights. The next one is a 3 again. The next one is 12. So this is 10, 11, 12. It's right here. Technically, I should be using a ruler, but because I put graph paper on there, you get away with it, right? It's pretty good. So this is 12. Okay. So that is your frequency table there. Sorry, this is your histogram. This is a histogram right now, and watch this. To do your frequency polygon, just find the middle between the top, go to the top of each bar and just make a mark, a point. These are the midpoints that we found earlier. We actually calculated them. And it's basically the point that lies in between that interval. Okay, I'm going to use a red pen if you have a marker or something. And so you connect your dots. Connect the dots, right? But there's a problem with that. Right now, you wouldn't get the full marks. I don't know if you remember, it needs to start and end in 0. So you kind of just go straight to the bottom here, and from here to here, kind of just go straight to the bottom there. So I will have a legend here, this, right at the bottom. The red line that I have is my frequency polygon. Okay. Whereas the bars is my histogram. I did both at the same time. It's easier to start with a histogram, and then if I ask you for the frequency polygon, just find the point that's in between, and where you go. Okay. No homework. I'm not ready to assign the homework yet. So what I would say is that, well, no homework unless you haven't done enough of what we did yesterday. Go to the previous page and there's textbook questions. Maybe do at least one. Okay, so you're very familiar with number line plots and all of that. Thank you guys. As always, you're awesome.